Okay, good morning. Please take your seats. We're going to open the conference. Sabah al-khair. Okay, good morning. My name is Nasser Yassin. I'm a faculty member in the School of Public Health in AUB, and I'm the Director of Research in the Issam Institute for Public Policy. And I've been working with my colleagues at IFI, at AUB for Refugees Initiative, and at LSE and ALUM Network to organize this conference. So we're really so glad to have you with us today and for the next, for today and for tomorrow. We were expecting His Excellency, the Minister of Education and Higher Education, but you know, we're in a dynamic region, so the country slept on Friday evening different than what it actually woke up on Friday morning. So, but we have my friend MP Ziad Qadri. Thanks for coming. We have ambassadors, Madame Girard, the UNHCR representative, and Mr. Provost, Mr. Mohamed Harajli. Thank you for coming, and thanks for everyone, for the guests and for our colleagues. This is a conference that's part of the ALUM network. Erik, Berglof, the director of the Institute for Global Affairs at LSE, will tell us more about the network. But AUB joined the network last year, and this is the Alliance of Lead Universities on Migration. Until last year, it was mostly a European club, so we actually engaged with Erik and Piroska and the colleagues, and we tried to convince them that this is where the refugee issues are happening more than in Europe. Europe only has, I guess, a small percent of its population is refugees, whereas actually the region here, and Syria in particular, are going through this crisis or this protracted crisis. We want to thank the Open Society Foundation for helping us in making this conference and for supporting ALUM. And I want to thank also the UNHCR office here in Beirut for supporting in this conference. It will be for 2 days. We have 5 sessions. They look into issues related to the refugee crisis and the refugee question, but also into how universities are responding. And we have 2 roundtables, and in those roundtables, we'll particularly try to ask questions about our role as academics, as academy, in responding to policy issues, to advocacy issues, to impacting more the debate on the refugees and immigration. We have another roundtable tomorrow related to the business schools and to the private sector and how businesses are actually or can contribute to addressing impacts of the refugee crisis. And we have 3 keynotes that will be addressed and introduced throughout. We're using the hashtag AUB for Refugees. Last year we did trend. I doubt we will trend today with what's happening in the government, so we can't compete with what's going on. But I want to give you in 1 minute why we're actually here in this forum, why we're here. You know, I think this is an age of growing uncertainty. It's an age where actually a constant anxiety exists, and such anxieties and uncertainties are being fueled by populists, by demagogue politicians, reinforcing actually such anxiety and replaying the game of xenophobia against refugees, against immigrants. And it's our natural role as universities to assure societies, to assure our communities, and actually stand with those most vulnerable and disenfranchised. I think when we stand with refugees, it's not just we're doing the research to impact the discussion only. We're not just doing research to prove or to do assessment. Actually, at the essence of it is to stand with those who need to be stand, as universities should do, you know, whether refugees or poor host communities. So that's actually one of the premises of this conference and the whole discussion and the whole of work of the ALUM and what we do here in AUB. But also in the age of post-facts, you know, it's a post-fact society, falsehood, fake news. I mean, you get to read about this every day. And such fake news and falsehoods are exaggerating the burdens. It's our role as universities to actually address this in what we do best, research and evidence, in facts. Really bring the debate back where it should be, based on the evidence. That's our role, you know. So we really need to get this back. I mean, academics, as usually in their ivory tower, shouldn't be the case. We should actually really work on those issues and bring the debate back to evidence and facts. That's the best we can do. And thirdly, this is really an age of increasing gatedness. We're gated as communities, we gated as societies, physically, socially, politically, academically. I think we need to, what we do in such forum and through these networks is really to break such gates and such walls. And we ought as universities to be open and safe spaces, as universities should be, you know, and as an enlightened places where we need to debate and open those issues in a safe space, such a university, such an institute, such a forum like this. And that's exactly what we want to do here in this debate. Open the discussion in a very, you know, positive and open manner, and there are no taboos around the issues. We need to put all these things on the discussion. And that's exactly what we aim to do on this forum. I don't want to, it's not a speech, I just want to put the context and the scene we are in, where actually we can move forward in the discussion and in the sessions. And I'll stop here and I'll ask my colleague, Erik Berglof, to also say a few words about it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. No. So thank you, Nasser, and it's been wonderful to work with you on this, preparing this conference. So I really want to greet you welcome on behalf of the Institute of Global Affairs at the LSE and the Alliance of Leading Universities on Migration, or ALUM as we call it. So it's great to be back in Beirut and back at AUB. It's great to be back at this campus that I think is the most beautiful campus in the world, actually. And so we are coming together here, you know, across countries, across regions, across disciplines. We are bringing in perspectives of policymakers, of businesses. It's really an experiment. It's not a very controlled experiment, but it's nevertheless an experiment. And we want to experiment in generating ideas for how universities can respond to the refugee crisis. It's, you know, last time I was here in Beirut, it was for the launch of the AUB for Refugees initiative. And we were so deeply impressed by the scale and scope of what different departments and individual faculty and students have done to reach out and open up to the refugee community in Lebanon. So indeed it inspired us at LSE to start working with AUB on a vision that we call Universities Without Borders. It may be a bit cliche, but I will try to give you a sense of what we have in mind. It's a vision where universities not only open up, you know, to provide scholarships to refugees or maybe provide safe harbor to scholars at risk, but it's really, as Nasser so elegantly showed, it's about opening up these gated communities of disciplines and also of different categories of staff in universities. We really think that migration can and working with refugees can create an energy that can break down these borders and open up conversations and also inspire action in a way that very few other issues can. And of course, ultimately, it's about trying to play a role in the protection and integration of refugees and in managing the refugee crisis. But of course, this is not only taking place at AUB. When we were calling around in the fall of 2015 to universities across Europe, we were really struck by how much was happening, more or less spontaneously, in universities across Europe. And, you know, very spontaneous initiatives. I remember when we were speaking to Mannheim, for example, you know, they have given up a number of lecture halls to house refugees. They had, your students have started collecting used bikes for refugees. It was a lot of spontaneous action, and I think what makes universities different is, of course, many of the things that Nasser was emphasizing about the openness and so on, but it's also, you know, what we are good at is to learn from what we are doing. At least we claim to be good at this, and that's what we wanted to develop within this initiative. So not only do we want to be activists and be out there and try to have an impact, but we also want to learn about how to best to do this. So we want to combine activism and research, what we call activist research. And this is very much the spirit of the ALUM network, but it's also the spirit of this Universities Without Borders. And so Universities Without Borders is about opening up universities to the rest of the community, but also about tearing down these walls within universities across disciplines. And it's probably not even economics will claim that they have all the answers to the migration challenge. But from our experience, the refugee issue is an issue that can also break down barriers across categories of staff and between faculty and students. We want to use, again, the power of migration to engage and inspire. And from what I've seen here with the AUB for refugees, it's a beautiful illustration of power. So we are very much committed to playing a role in shaping policy and helping implementation on the ground. And of course, an important part of this is influencing attitudes and behavior. Again, AUB with its facts on daily facts on the refugee crisis has played a very important role in highlighting this and getting a lot of attention to these facts. But we also try to engage other universities in this region, and again, AUB has been central to help us do this. We want to encourage high-quality research and evidence-based policymaking, but we also want to engage with civil society and the private sector. We think that universities can play a role in helping to build capacity also in non-governmental organizations that often struggle, particularly local organizations, without these global networks. We can play a role in supporting that. And we will very much want to do this in a partnership with AUB. So we are developing this initiative together with the Open Society Foundation, and we're very grateful for their support for this conference. But maybe most of all, we are very grateful to Professor Nasser and his team here, Roya Kodor and her colleagues, have done so much to make this event happen. And I'm also very grateful to my own team here, Piroska and Mohamed and Jerry Mirich and Karina Stern for all their hard work. So thank you very much and most welcome to this conference. Thank you.
Mr. Provost, Dr. Mohamed Harajli is the Provost of AUB, and he will, now the floor is for Dr. Harajli, where he'll tell us about AUB and what AUB is doing on the refugee scene, please.
Thank you, Nasser. Okay, good morning, everyone. Fellow organizers, esteemed guests, AUB officials, and friends, good morning again. On behalf of AUB, I would like to welcome you on our Beirut campus. AUB is a university that for the past 151 years had thrived amidst repeatedly emerging instabilities in the region. And the last one was the resignation of our Prime Minister in Lebanon. It is no secret that this region of the world did not witness a stretched period of good times in the near history. Yet, despite all, AUB has managed to educate the best intellectuals, statesmen, scientists, engineers, and doctors of the Arab world. Our graduates live up to our motto, engaged on our main gate, that they may have life and have it more abundantly. At AUB, we are not looking just to give our graduates a better life. However, we are equipping them to make the world a better place. Through service and for years, we have strived to give a better life to the entire community, impacting the lives of the most vulnerable members of our societies. In fact, it's our duty as a world-class university in the heart of Beirut to serve the underprivileged to the limits of our ability. Through the years, we have faced, unfortunately, many refugee crises, as far as the first waves of Armenian refugees arriving in Beirut in 1915 and 1939, then Palestinians in 1948. The Lebanese internally displaced in the 1970s and 1980s because of the civil war and because of the war against Lebanon, and most recently, Syrian refugees. AUB, through its faculty, its medical center, and its students, never shied away from assisting and serving its community. However, today we are facing the hardest challenge of all times. The current refugee crisis is a scale never seen since World War II. And it has created unprecedented challenges for refugees themselves and for the hosting communities. Competition over the scarce resources and an increased pressure on the educational and health services, among others, have led the systems running these sectors to reach their limits. Our position as a university in responding to such a crisis is not that of academic luxury, but it is an utmost necessity. At AUB, we have adopted a whole university approach to address the impacts of the refugee crisis. Through the AUB for Refugees initiative, led by Mr. Nasser Yassin and colleagues, we have mapped 72 projects from across all units in AUB, from medicine, health sciences, agriculture, engineering, to social sciences, humanities, public policy, civic engagement, and community education. Through research, teaching, or community engagement, all of these projects aim to innovate, to be innovative, and to generate cutting-edge and feasible results. We also understand that young refugees, men and women, as well as those bright kids in the impoverished host communities, are struggling to get the proper education. Believing that those young women and men will be the future of their countries, we have launched and continue to expand several of our educational programs to provide for those vulnerable societies a chance for a better future for them and for societies they live in or they will eventually serve in the future. As part of the AUB for Refugees initiative, AUB, and in collaboration with the Kayani Foundation, led by Mrs. Noura Jumblat, took the initiative to bring education to the temporary settlements of the Syrian refugees. In collaboration and partnership with Kayani, 9 Ghata schools are welcoming more than 4,500 refugees have been established in the Biqa'a plain, in the Biqa'a region, offering primary education, vocational training, and university preparatory education. The Ghata project was first developed to address the urgent need for a safe and temporary shelter for Syrian refugees living in informal tented settlements throughout Lebanon. Ghata structures are designed by our own Center for Civic Engagement and Community Service as a cost-effective units built from locally available materials, simple to assemble, disassemble, and transport, and capable of withstanding difficult weather conditions. 62 units were installed in the refugees camps in Biqa'a, serving as classrooms to which the young children have easy access to. A few months ago, President Khouri and I, the president of AUB, President Khouri and I, had the chance to visit these schools with Mrs. Noura Jumblat, and I was overwhelmed by the cheerful faces and the enthusiasm for learning of these young children. The children aged 5 to 16 are very young. These schools represent an oasis of hope in a desert, as I put it one day. These schools represent an oasis of hope in a desert of indifference by the international community towards one of the most agonizing refugee crises that the world has ever witnessed. We want to continue to fulfill AUB's mission and to present those communities with opportunities for higher education. Through our scholarship programs, we are able to provide the financially needy but bright students with education at AUB that they deserve. It is a priority for AUB to further expand those programs and open the gates for more students to join. We want to make sure that any member of the refugee community, regardless of their financial status, is able to enter AUB. Our graduates' positive impact echoes for years within their societies. Hence, we believe that education is the best investment for the betterment of humanity and society, and particularly in this part of the world. The roles of universities is crucial at this point. We see this international conference as a great opportunity to widen the debate on how universities can respond to the refugee crises. Let me remind you that the world today has more than 65 million refugees. This figure is correct? Is it? It is. The highest to be recorded. The discussion you will have in this room shall be heard by all of those concerned in resolving the predicaments of refugees. It's a great pleasure to welcome you today and to know that scholars from 21 universities from across the world are present here today. I wish you a good time at AUB and a very successful and a productive conference. I will look forward to read its declaration, the Beirut Declaration. Thank you and have a great morning.
Thank you, Mr. Provost. The morning, we didn't mention that we're actually working on what we call the Beirut Declaration. Thank you, Mr. Provost, for reminding us about this. The Beirut Declaration with, yes, with the teams in ALUM, with AUB and LSE, we actually came up with this idea to do what we call the Beirut Declaration of how the universities and academics can and should and need to respond to crises like the refugee crisis and the migration crisis in Europe. So we want to set the stage for how universities should work on this. So hopefully tomorrow we'll be working on drafting this. So anyone is welcome at 8 a.m. if you would like to come to join the small team that's actually drafting it, and we will announce its final draft before we close tomorrow afternoon. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Mireille Girard, the representative of UNHCR in Lebanon, and I think she will confirm the 65 million refugees at the well, please.
Thank you very much. On the 65 million, it's actually 65 million persons displaced by war and other circumstances. 22 million of them are refugees. The others are displaced inside their countries. But an equal level of suffering, I would say. So I wanted to thank you very much for inviting me today. It's a privilege to be here, and we're all very much looking forward to the content of the Beirut Declaration tomorrow. I mean, clearly for UNHCR as a practitioner agency, if you wish, the role of university all over the world, and clearly here in Lebanon, universities of Lebanon have always played a very critical role in the advancing of policies and the development of the doctrine when it comes to law, for example. So these are very critical contribution to crisis in the world, to response to crisis in the world, and this role is not going to end. If anything, it will take more magnitude as we move forward. Here, perhaps for the purpose of this conference, I would like to quickly point to perhaps 3 areas of strategic alliances where the humanitarian world and universities can really join forces to push the agenda for the protection of people in crisis. So first and foremost, I would say university can be really a voice in the global debate on refugee protection, on migration, on issues relating to displacement. As you know, we had last year in New York a conference on refugees and migrants that led to a New York Declaration. So let's see how the Beirut Declaration contributes to the New York Declaration. That created the frame of a comprehensive refugee response framework, explaining how a refugee problem is everyone's problem. It's not one country's problem. And we can all contribute from the beginning of the crisis to the end of it, from the first days of being uprooted to a final solution to a refugee crisis. How we can all contribute. You were speaking about the whole of university approach. I will say the New York Declaration speaks about the whole of society response, how everyone from religious institution, civil society in general, political circles, people themselves, the private sector. Tomorrow you're going to look into more the private sector contribution. This is a very much untapped resources in refugee crisis. We have a lot to learn from this. So in the context of this whole of society response, university have a fundamental role to play. They have played that in the past, but perhaps now with in this context of preparing for the next conference in New York, September next year, or the fall of next year, where a global refugee compact will be adopted. So beyond just a framework, we will be working towards, we have 1 year to go, to work towards a global agreement on refugee responsibility sharing for refugee response. So we have a year to go. This is a challenging task. What can we contribute? And what can AUB, what can the universities in Lebanon, what can universities in the world contribute to that? I think this is a challenge ahead of us that we shouldn't let go. Collecting good practices, experimentation, policy, guidance, everything that we can contribute to the Global Compact. The second avenue of strategic alliance could be certainly universities as a melting pot for innovation. We've discussed that with the creation of AUB for refugees. Actually, we had that discussion, how universities are at the forefront of research, of experimentation, of innovation. How can we think more and better and less expensive? What can we do better in the context of a humanitarian response? In the context of the Grand Bargain, you know, the World Humanitarian Summit that took place last year as well, and the Grand Bargain theory that, you know, we all have to really push the parameters of efficiency, of relevance, of usefulness for people. What can university contribute to this? Here in Beirut, for example, we're working with AUB on targeting. How can we target the most vulnerable people out of the 1 million plus refugees here in this country? How can we really, if we don't have money for everyone, how can we find the most vulnerable? Through not only going and visiting everyone, but science can help us jump the gun and actually find the people through a desk formula that enables us to immediately, before even visiting people, we can identify them. That's one of the research we do. With Saint Joseph University, we're working with the School of Social Sciences to also work in terms of working more closely with population. How can we empower populations to help themselves first? And so these are a few avenues that I wanted to mention. And lastly, with universities, another avenue for cooperation and strategic alliance is universities as social moderators. I think everyone spoke about it today. It is a topical issue. University in a context where there is a restriction there is a debate that is sometimes very heated, restrictions on discussions on the rights of refugees. A university can advocate for rights, can stand for rights, reminding everyone that at the end we're speaking about people. We are speaking about human beings. Having the distance that university have to speak with an authoritative voice and remind everyone to the basics. Combat fears with facts, and this is what AUB for Refugees is doing, with instilling facts. You know, the debate sometimes can be inflamed based on figures that actually are generating fear, incitation to violence, whereas they're not actually grounded on reality. By really injecting facts in the debate, we are actually moderating the debate. We are calming down a situation that could be very heated otherwise. So at this crucial moment here in Lebanon, but elsewhere in the world, I would say in Europe, clearly, in other parts of where we have other crises, in Kenya, for example, other parts of the world, Asia, the Rohingyas, you know, university can help us put us back to the basics, as I said. We're working with Saint Joseph University, for example, also on perception survey. How do the Lebanese community feel about, how does it feel about refugee presence, and how do the refugee feel about being hosted here in Lebanon or in Jordan or in Turkey? What is the feelings? And, you know, analyzing that so that we can better respond to the anxiety sometimes of people on all sides. And finally, universities are also an opportunity for refugees and other displaced population to study, to have a future. Here in AUB, I know you have a number of students of scholarship that you're sponsoring. UNHCR in this country has several hundred students that are benefiting from a scholarship that enables them to pursue their tertiary education, even though they had to interrupt it when they fled their country. So universities are also have also that role of providing a space to study, a space to not lose their future, and creating a generation of hope for their country. Thank you very much.